No, she's not.
I'm too busy right now.
I think they're just like going back, so I think they were supposed to go back before.
Great, so.
It's not a bad day. No, that's.
That's
It is like here. That's it.
Every seat.
What's in the?
Okay.
What's in
Yeah, the Waldo Theater, the Waldo Theater is where we saw.
Oh.
It's not, if I can't go. It's from Illinois. Definitely. Midwestern, but. It's getting me, so. There will be more opportunity.
Yeah.
Really good.
Not my camera was taken out, so my.
It's the lighting.
There's a kind of.
Someone sneeze on
You wanna swap seats and see if it follows you?
No, yeah, I already know it's not my camera, but I suppose I can put my finger on it, it's there.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Most of it all.
Turn it around, face it.
It must be because it does a 360.
Oh, it clicks, well, it's got little eyes too.
it. His brother, Mike, all of his renters.
With it.
That zoomed in on who's talking, so I'm assuming those are the directional.
Okay.
Yeah, is the noise okay? I'm in the car.
Yeah. Maybe.
No, now
Needs to get focused back on the building.
Well, I know, it'll fix itself.
You're gonna talk, building.
Hello, hello. No, nothing.
Yeah, I think it's just a small.
Nothing.
No,
Okay.
no, it's just you.
It's just you.
It's your Hannah.
Who's the kid on? Charlie Brown, Big Ben that had the.
Yeah,
Big Ben?
Big Ben, that's you.
Or those.
Like a shit, I would sing a song or tap dance or something.
I pay money.
Or an Irish jig.
Those the Irish. We should be dancing the jig.
You don't wanna see that.
Again, I pay money.
This is on here.
Yeah, she's on her way back from Boston. They just got in from China. Oh,
They're also, they're in the States.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to call AAA, car wouldn't start, blah, blah, blah.
Well, the last week, it was not for me.
It's the same thing on paper as it said when I read it online.
Imagine.
Imagine it. Okay. I sometimes can't retain as much on if I read it online.
All right, calling the meeting to order at 6 P.M. Please rise if you're able to join us to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of treasurer's warrants, and Elisa, I'll do the same thing I did before with Pam. I'll just, do vote here and then I'll ask your name for your vote. Payroll warrants for March 6th, 2026 and March 13th, 2026, open for motion.
Move to approve the payroll warrants of March 6th and March 13, 2026.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Elisa? Oh, do you have to unmute her?
I have the header, but. This is.
Yes, approve.
Thank you. All right, accounts payable warrants for March 10th, 2026 and March 17th, 2026, open for motion.
Move to approve the account payable warrants for March 6th and March 17, 2026.
Second.
I think you meant March 10th.
March, oh, what did I say?
6, actually.
Did I? Oh, March 10 and March 17, 2026. Sorry.
That's all right. Been moved and seconded, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Elisa? Elisa, do you?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Approval of the minutes for March 3rd, 2026. Open for motion.
I move to approve the minutes of March 3, 2026.
Second.
Can James second that since he wasn't there, or he's
Second, he just can't vote it.
Okay. Any questions, edits? Seeing none, all those in favor? Elisa
Yes,
and abstain. Motion passes 4-0-1. Alright, public comment, is there anyone who wishes to speak on something not on the agenda for tonight? If so, if you could please come forward and state your name for the record. You have up to 5 minutes.
Ralph Felton. I'm here to, say that you did a nice job on lot 6 down on Birch Point. When you had, Hawks come in and cut everything over 6 inches. It's really nice. I don't know if you've walked down through there or not. There's 300 acres of town owns. The thing is now you need to do something with it. Right? The town owns it. And across the street on the ferry road is 542 metric tons of nuclear waste. So you don't wanna have, my personal opinion, you don't wanna have housing built in there because it's too close. It's a 200-foot setback from the river. There's, like I say, you've already surveyed it. You've already had it selectively cut. It's ready to go. I know you've had conversations between the selectmen and somebody who wants to put an AI data center in there. That was a few months ago. But anyway, this is a nice commercial lot. You did a nice job on it. And I would hate to see you try to divide it up and put housing or anything in there. It's more or less a good place to have a commercial lot.
Thank you. And what was your name, sir? I'm sorry.
Ralville.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak to something not on the agenda? Anyone online? Going once? Going twice?
Welcome to Maine.
I guess she's in Maine now.
Yes, on guess what bridge?
Wait, I don't hear the thump, the thump, the thump.
All right, February monthly reports from department heads, any questions, discussion? Okay. Okay. Right, new business, Haley Ward presentation of the Wiscasset Waterfront Resilience Project final report. Come on up.
Thank you.
You share your screen. Online.
Ooh, huh?
I think we've had issues sharing screens in the past with that.
Where's the button? Okay, here we go.
Usually it's right in here.
Usually it's its own button. Okay.
They give it half the size.
Great,
I'm saying, I totally agree with
Technology,
Man,
how
that.
easy.
Somebody can come around.
Dennis,
Dennis, didn't you make a, she got it. I saw she said that.
oh, there we go. Oh, is it doing it on the laptop instead of the?
yeah, I'm not know why.
I think there was a setting in Zoom that you changed, remember?
Well. Let's go.
I've also got it on my laptop if you want me to just plug right into it or something.
Yeah, you may have to, because the whole laptop's not black, so.
You do have for plugins, Sarah.
HDMI, but it's something to do with the screen mirroring.
I'll just pull it up on mine, you can share that off the. Oh, actually, I don't have the PowerPoint on the PDFs. Joy, is that? Okay. Or
Sure.
already.
Oh, wait, you're. Oh. Oh,
Browsing.
okay. Wait a second.
Why is it so small?
I just, but I don't know. No, I just don't want it to go to, yeah.
Right, him out. Plug in and then I can actually control it from my house too, if that's easier.
Okay, if you just wanna take it, that's the best we're gonna do.
We'll just try that, sorry. Oh, sure, or I can. Oh, shit, it's on an auto thing, so.
Yeah, that's our business station's gone.
Okay,
I'm gonna go.
guess I can sit over the time.
Okay.
Yeah, goes down. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for taking time to listen to us present about our project today. My name is Ben Meter. I'm a project manager at Haley Ward. We're an engineering, surveying, and environmental firm. My position, I'm the New England manager for geographic and data sciences, and I'm the environmental planning lead for our firm. My role in this project was to be a project manager for our engineers and scientists and other personnel. I live in South Bristol, Maine, so the fact that I got to work on a project as close to home as this was a great pleasure for me. So I thank you for that. And why this project? Of course, now this is working. See, there we go. There we go. Okay. So this project was motivated by the floods of 2024 in January. Obviously, the climate action team's been working on inundation on the waterfront for a while, but these kind of sharpened the issues of the waterfront. The sea level rise, the waterfront inundation brought on by these storms kind of gave us a sneak peek at what we might expect in the future from climate change. So the town. I'm so sorry. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. The town, through the Community Resiliency Partnership, which is part of the government, the Governor's Office of Policy and Innovation in the Future. The town applied for a community action grant, which was awarded $50,000 to study the issue of inundation at the waterfront and waterfront resiliency. They put out a request for proposal, an RFP, which a number of firms responded to. Haley Ward was the winning firm, and we created both a work group, a planning group, and a steering group. So the work group or the planning group was consisted of members of the Wiscasset Climate Action Team, members of the Wiscasset Waterfront Committee, and in particular, I say thank you to Bill Maloney and to Elisa Eason for being the select board liaisons. The group met monthly throughout the year, throughout 2025. And a subgroup of that, so this is the steering group, was me, the project manager, Aaron Krastowski, the town of Wiscasset's economic development director, and Dr. Cassandra Rose, who was the climate action team committee chair. So the three of us met bi-weekly throughout the year to discuss the projects and to kind of advance the effort. Next slide, please. Again, we're going to go through a few of these pictures just as a reminder of the inundation that was experienced in January of 2024. Next slide. I hate to use the phrase sneak peek, but this was at about approximately 4 feet above mean higher high water, which is approximately the level that we would expect to see based on the state adopted sea level rise scenarios for 2100. Next slide. Next slide. So what do we do? So starting in February 2025, we met, again, the steering group met bi-weekly and the planning group met more or less monthly. We missed a few sessions in the summer. And the consulting team, which is what I was in charge of, we split the project into 3 phases. Phase 1 was to study the current conditions in as great detail as we could, specifically for the Wiscasset waterfront, the 2 parcels owned by the town. The second phase was to do public engagement and to sound the opinions of people throughout the community. Thanks for keeping your finger on that. Because it just went black, but yeah, thank you. And then the third phase was to incorporate that engagement and provide a final assessment for the town. And if you haven't received it yet, the final report, which you have a few paper copies here, and you should have received a digital copy, was the result of that effort. And this is a condensed version of the final presentation. There was a final presentation given to the public about the results of the study in November. There were 2 presentations given at that time. Next slide. So as part of that first existing conditions work, we did a scan using a reality capture technique where we have somebody we see all those spheres along the waterfront. We had someone with a station scan all over the waterfront to get a high resolution 3-dimensional model of the waterfront so we could compare that against the sea level datums. Next slide. We did that at both the commercial and recreational piers and also at the Creamery Pier. Next slide. In addition to this, we also flew a drone over the whole waterfront to get in between those 2 sites and to see Pleasant Street extension and kind of the waterfront between Route 1 and that Pleasant Street extension. And that gave us high resolution, what's called topographic information. And we flew at low tide so we could see what the topography looked like when the water was down and get a more clear picture of the whole waterfront. Next slide. So, this was all based around, well, what can we do? We know that the waterfront is at risk, and what are the options that we have? In general, when water inundation is an issue, there's only several options that we can really do. You can elevate assets, so those would be structures or lands. You can make it higher so that the water doesn't inundate it as much. You can build flood walls. You can try to keep the water out. You can flood proof, which you can do 2 kinds: dry flood proofing, which is where you try to keep the assets completely dry by insulating them from the water. Or you can wet proof the assets, meaning you, up to a certain height, allow those assets to become wet, and that's the goal. So we looked at the assets all throughout the waterfront and came up with some recommendations based on what we found. So next slide. So the next series of slides, I'm going to just go through kind of what we looked at and then how we're thinking about it, and kind of the big takeaways for this. And if you want a lot of detail, the 70-page report had a lot in it, so I'd be happy to answer questions even after this meeting tonight if you want to ask any more detailed questions. So the existing conditions, we had 2 main parcels that the town owns. There's well, actually, that open land at the northeast is owned by DOT, but it's in service of the Creamery Pier, which the town does own, which is the structure just to the south of it. We'll get that in a minute. And then the open land on the waterfront, the town landing parcel with the 2 boat ramps. Next slide. So in addition to those pieces of open land, we have a lot of physical assets. There's the commercial pier, which is a concrete and floating dock structure. There's a recreational pier, which is a fixed pier, elevated wooden structure. And then there's a connecting boardwalk between the 2 on the town landing side. There's also a harbor master structure with an office and restrooms. And then at the Creamery Pier, again, an elevated pier with temporary structures on top that are leased to private owners. Next slide. The big picture is that in the very short term, which is the red, so the red is mean higher high water, which is kind of the average of all the highest of the high tides. So there's 2 tides a day. Each tide, each day, there's usually 2 elevations. Of all the higher of the 2, the average of that is what a lot of engineers use as kind of a benchmark to build above. So mean higher high water in 2050, so that's 25 years from when we did the study, 24 years now, I guess. The state adopted projection for sea level rise is 1.5 feet. So that means that at 2050, we would expect the fringes of the waterfront to be inundated likely at least once a day. By 2100, the outlook is much more bleak based on the state adopted sea level rise scenarios of 4 feet by 2100. So within 75 years, we would expect to see not all the structures, but a lot of the landscape being frequently inundated at that time. Next slide. So despite, I would say the biggest takeaway from all this that, what are we gonna do based on this kind of fairly bleak outlook? When we presented this to the waterfront committee, the climate action team, the public, the economic development team, we kind of got resounding support to improve the waterfront. And quite honestly, my team of engineers and scientists, and the permitting specialists, everyone that looked at this information is like, it's a very thin piece of land. Again, with the projected scenarios that we see, it looks like a lot of investment to try to make this waterfront last another century. But the resounding answer from the public and all those groups was that our waterfront is one of our most valuable assets in this town, and we need to preserve it, and we need to work at creating a more resilient plan for it in the future. So in order to do that, we proposed several different solutions that we worked through. Some of those options were later taken off the table, and we came up with a phased approach to create a more resilient waterfront by 2100. So the first part, I'll go through these and then we'll flip through some more slides, and then I'll have a timeline at the end I'll show. But the big picture is that the first phase is that the waterfront is composed of multiple sets of parcels, all of which are at slightly different elevations. We have good information on how high each of those are above the ocean and what's on them, and some insights on what to do with them. But what the waterfront, we believe, really needs is a master plan. And the difference between a site plan and a master plan is that a master plan survives over a certain period of time. It can get revised. It's adopted by, be adopted by the town so that it guides development across all of the parcels, because the parcels are owned by, there's intervening parcels between the two town parcels. And it's a fairly extensive and complex site. A master plan, if done properly, would help guide the development. The saying in our trade, in the planning trade, goes that the developers come and go, but the master plan endures. And if it's done well, then it will really help waterfront. Second phase is that while that's underway, the existing structures on the site could be elevated in stages. So we don't need to tackle the whole problem at once. Not everything is immediately in threat. The Creamery Pier, for instance, is not likely to be inundated for many, many decades at a current rate of sea level rise that's adopted by the state. So we would suggest to elevate the existing structures as they are most at risk, and to parse that out over time. The third phase is, again, based on the community input and working with our permitting specialists and our engineers, is that ideally the town landing and the Creamery Pier could be reconnected following somewhat the historical. I believe there's a connection from the narrow gauge railroad, historically, but in modern terms, the groups all believe that connecting the waterfront would not only create better pedestrian access, but be an economic benefit to the town, as well as a just quality of life. Looking at the waterfront as kind of a public space and wanting to promote that. So, and that's phase 3. And phase 4 is that if the state adopted figures for sea level rise come to fruition, the boat ramps will not be functional by 2100. As much as you would try to elevate the land, they're restricted by the railroad tracks, and you could not grade them back enough for them to be functional in the long term. Not an immediate problem, even in the terms of 2 or 3 decades. But if they are to be relocated, then there's no reason not to start thinking about where boat ramps for the town could be relocated. Next slide. So that phase 1 master planning, this visual is to just simply show that the entire waterfront would be best served to have a master plan. What does that mean functionally? Well, it means that you're creating visualizations and kind of a guiding, I'll say a guiding star, but a vision for what the whole thing should look like. That would involve elevating the each piece of land, creating potentially new types of uses for each piece of land. Before that happens, and part of that master plan should be, in our view, a town-wide and or waterfront wide assessment of the multimodal needs. And what that means is, how do people access the parking lots? How do they use the parking lots? Where are people walking? How are they walking? We know historically, of course, there's been a lot of studies done in Wiscasset on traffic, and just the, one of the highest use roads in the state of Maine, completely crossing the town. So once you assess the parking capacity and future parking needs, then you can actually start to design what future waterfront would be most beneficial to the town, again, with heavy input and engagement from people in the town. So after you do that multimodal analysis, you'd be creating concept plans for each parcel and kind of a vision for the whole waterfront. Next slide. So phase 2 would again be to elevate existing structures. The lowest and most severely damaged structure is the boardwalk seawall. So there's a seawall and boardwalk that connect the recreational and commercial piers on the lower part of the screen. So that's right in the middle of the two of them. There's been a couple of different views advanced. One of them is that the seawall needs to be repaired one way or the other. The boardwalk itself is damaged enough that it, in its current condition, could become a liability if it's not already, and it could either be removed or replaced. The recreational pier, which is at the same height, would be the easiest one to work on elevating. You could either, and again, this would require the work of a contractor with an engineer to develop the concept, but you could either retrofit, potentially taking with cranes that existing structure, remove it, elevate the pylons and replace, or demo and rebuild in the exact same place. And the goal would be to raise that structure so that it is out of the water when there's future storm surge, exacerbated by future sea level rise. And then similarly with the Creamery Pier and the commercial piers, we have a lot more time to work on those, but ideally what you're doing is you're elevating the structures first. And then once the master plan is complete, you would be then elevating and or reworking the sites to also be elevated to meet those structures. Doing it in a phased approach, we think is going to be more financially feasible long-term, and we'll have kind of digestible and actionable steps along the way to help encourage kind of a multi-decade process. Next slide. So this is just to show part of the reason for how we've suggested to connect the waterfront. This is showing the ownership of parcels along the waterfront. So as I mentioned before, in the upper right, you see that MDOT, the Maine Department of Transportation, owns the parcel that the parking is on for the Creamery Pier. In blue, right next to it is, the U01063. That's a town-owned parcel that the Creamery Pier sits on. And then down in the lower left, we have the town-owned town landing parcel. Between them, we have private owners that actually own a sliver of land, both on the Water Street side and on the waterfront side. So that thin sliver of land, which kind of encapsulates the railroad and DOT right of way, has to be dealt with. I mean, regardless of what sea level rise projections are, that ownership is not, it's going to exist one way or the other. So some of the options we had for trying to connect the waterfront, because that was clearly one of the directions the town wanted to go, was to try to build along that set of parcels, which would require actually, it would require that those parcels be bought or acquired in some fashion. Very difficult to permit. So if you can go to the next slide now, what we suggest instead is connecting the two elevated docks. So once those two piers are elevated, we suggest connecting them with an elevated boardwalk that's similarly high. And there's, again, many reasons in the appendix that you can read why we believe this is the most feasible way. the most important points to remember are that, permitting for impact, all coastal areas and unconsolidated shores like this are considered wetland areas. So if you were to try to build a physical path or a railroad siding was suggested, there were a couple different versions. Those would all require what are called toe slopes, just engineering and hardened shore to support them. And that would be a pretty significant impact on the shoreline. An elevated boardwalk, however, even though it does still have a lot of impact, the impact is mostly measured by the pylons that would go into that wetland. So much lower impact, potentially easier to permit. There's also a chance that, again, our permitting guy isn't here tonight, but that creating a pedestrian boardwalk like this could classify as a pedestrian bridge potentially, with evidence that it's kind of hard to walk from the downtown area along the waterfront to the town landing. So again, another piece of evidence that this would be easier to permit. Similarly, this could be built and constructed in a way that could withstand flooding damage a lot more easily. So where a stone dust trail or something similar would likely be eroded by water inundating it. If you construct a boardwalk like this to be wet proof, then it could potentially last longer, again, with maintenance, but and elevating that to different heights is much less expensive than trying to elevate land to different heights. So we suggest that this phase 3 is to connect, that you should connect the waterfront, kind of resounding support from almost every group we encountered, and that this would be the most feasible concept to do it. And again, this is a concept, not a engineered figure here. Next slide, please. And the last thing is that long term, if you can see the railroad, we've talked extensively with MDOT, and they do not have any plans to repurpose or change or elevate the railroad. So the railroad, based on what we heard, is going to exist and be functional as long as it can be functional. And when and if the time comes that it's inundated, it's most likely would become exempt, but it could be 50 years, it could be 70 years, we don't really have any concept there. So in the event that the railroad doesn't move, those boat ramps are going to become essentially harder and harder to use over the decades. And because the railroad exists at grade there, you're not going to be able to elevate the land and regrade it. So everything on that town landing parcel, if you were to try to elevate that land, is going to become more and more of an island over time. So we suggest, again, long-term, for having water access in the scale of decades and past the century, is to find another water access, trailable water access place in the town to serve water access for trailers long term. And next slide. So this very complicated graphic is just it's a timeline, and it kind of describes in detail this phased approach. In the top section, which I won't go through in detail, you can see in green are the actual feet of elevation above mean high water in the intermediate and high scenarios. And then when they turn to yellow is when they're at kind of high risk, which means they're at a much lower elevation, closer to that high tide line. And then when they turn orange, they're likely to be frequently inundated. And when they're red, they're likely to be inundated perhaps daily, depending on, again, how the projections come to fruition. So, and then on the lower right are suggested projects. On the phase 1, again, that's the waterfront master plan. Phase 2 is to kind of bolster the existing infrastructure, the actual structures themselves, to elevate them. And number 3 is to connect the waterfront with a design boardwalk. Number 4 is to relocate and plan for a future boat ramp in a different location. Next slide. So what's next? Already as part of this, the next parts of this long project that we suggest is the town has already applied for another community action grant to start some of the engineering work for elevating and repairing the existing structures at the waterfront. And then we started exploring funding for commencing that waterfront master plan project. So, my mouth is very dry and I'm gonna, let's do next slide, that might be it. And please, yeah, thank you again for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about, what we did.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll start with select board questions and then we'll go to the public. I have some, no one else does. Okay. Couple of things, I did read the full thing and was quite amused by some of the acronyms, like
Oh,
meow
the
and
meows,
stuff.
the meows and the moms,
Yeah, those were amusing. But I did wanna ask, in the very beginning, let's see, in page 16. When you talk about one of the main arguments for this option. You mentioned that, could be fundraised and constructed the most expediently. And so I was curious about particularly the word fundraised, because obviously a big question for all of this is how would we pay?
So page 16, let me make sure I'm seeing that there. Mostly,
Yeah, under concept plan.
gotcha. So, you know, a detailed capital investment plan was not really like part of this effort. It was mostly an environmental hazards assessment with some concept planning. Again, working with our civil engineers and planners, I think. You know, there were some ideas tossed out very early about, well, what if we made a giant project out of this, right? What if we created a railroad siding, or we created a giant seawall, or we had, you know, some kind of big concepts, which a lot of people like those ideas, but they're huge public investments that would require you know, again, probably more revenue than can be acquired and, you know, obviously appropriated by the town, but probably even in kind of grant funded, you know, it's hard to imagine something of that scale. So the phased approach, we believe, means that if you have a master plan that guides long-term what you want to achieve, then you're kind of biting off chunks that you can digest kind of grant by grant as you go along. And, you know, I don't wanna put Aaron or someone else on the spot here, but you know, in terms of economic development. There are many different pots of money you can go after, and it may be frustrating to try to approach it in a piecemeal way, but. Everyone on our consulting team believed that approaching it chunk by chunk like that would be more effective than trying to do one giant piece of work all at once. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Partially, and I get that you can't fully answer it, I guess I just wondered if. How likely we think at the moment it is that a decent chunk of this could be grant funded. Or just non-taxpayer dollars.
I think by doing it in smaller intervals, like chunks like phased, I think it allows us to get better access to the grants. For following reasons, there's, you know, grant agencies, they have limits, you know.
Right.
Like this grant that we just had was $50,000 to do the study. We just got another grant from the same group, $75,000 to do some engineering on the seawall. Anyways, where I was going with this is, the grants, by phasing it, you'll have more likely accessibility to the grants.
There's a better chance.
Yeah, a better chance. And then as we proceed slowly through that process, it also shows that there's been due diligence and thinking about it. As you apply for the grant, you say, well, we just did this study, or we just finished this project. And so then it makes the grant agency feel a little bit more comfortable giving us more money to do more work. One of the big pots of money that we really look at for some of the stuff, when we get ready to the bigger projects, when actually constructing, is congressionally directed spending. But that's something that, you know, we're out of the way based on other priorities in the town too.
I'd add on to that, that the Maine Infrastructure Adaptation Fund, through Maine DOT is, meant for these kinds of projects, so those provide larger pots of funding for, kind of waterfront, upgrades. I know that in other states, bonding has been a really helpful, source of capital, low interest capital. And from what I've heard, there is discussion that Maine may develop a, resilience, bank in the future. So if that's an option that the state wants to explore in the future through the master planning process, I think the state of Maine is really looking into how to finance options like this.
There's a lot of pots of money. I mean, there's the Northern Border Regional Commission. They have money that it's in the millions of dollars. So I mean, it depends on the project. You know, there's pots of money for different projects. So there's a work that we want to just elevate the working pier, you know, that has a true economic benefit. And I think there's a lot of money for that versus maybe the boardwalk, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think just throughout the process, you know, it's very easy for someone to take a Sharpie and draw what they wanna see. But and you know, I think at the beginning, it's like, well, you know, this is a working waterfront, you can't just lock it all down for a few years with a giant pot of money and try to build the thing. Like, you could take, you know, as is proposed, that first recreational pier, which is the lowest, just focusing on elevating that and not trying to do it all at once, and then raising the structures to the height they need to be. And then again, maybe this is 5 or 10 years in the future, connecting them together. It's just kind of cost over time and opportunities. I will say with other communities we've worked with, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but hopscotching like a long project that has shown success at getting grants longer term is definitely like has more traction and seems to be more likely to continue on. So I think that's, that was the impetus behind that phrase. I mean, you know, fundraising, you know, for instance, City of Gardner, who we're working with as well, their next step is instead of some kind of master plan where we need to create the vision, they need a capital investment plan. So they're actually working on a plan to figure out what problems to tackle first, second, third in their city, and to how to finance it over time. So, you know, capital investment plan, I'm not as familiar with Wiscasset's finances, but it's a good question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then on the timeline chart here, so am I correct that the actual in your proposal, the actual construction of the boardwalk isn't really until like what?
The span of-
2035?
Yeah, I think the span of time that we proposed there. Finalized waterfront site plan.
This is a 3.3 and 3.4 construction
Yeah.
elevate,
Yeah,
okay.
so,
that's-
and the span of time is meant to, you know, again, it's getting kind of fuzzier out there, but. Doesn't need to happen immediately, the sooner it can happen, the better, but. In this diagram is being shown as happening between 2030 and, 2037 or something like that, so.
Okay,
Yep.
cause I just want folks to be clear because that's what I thought, that this doesn't have, as to your point, this does not have to happen all in the next 3 years.
It doesn't even have to happen the
Like,
next
we don't have
decade,
to
I
come
think.
up with all of this if we decide to move forward in a very short amount of time, it's over time, so.
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it's just, this is all really contingent upon, you know, financial planning and, you know, fundraising and stuff like that. So I think he was just using that as a placeholder, you know. We talked about that.
And for the right of ways, for the folks who privately own property, am I correct that you just be securing the right of way, you wouldn't, in this option, you wouldn't be actually buying their land or proposing that, it would simply be,
I mean, so there's a couple things there. One is that, those property owners have a right to water access kind of built into their deeds. So if you were to construct this, you would either need to purchase a right of way or work with those property owners to secure a covenant or something like that, where they would have the ability to access it privately, perhaps. There've been other cases, I think, on the East Coast where something like this happens and then they have a special right to a gated floating dock. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that would have to happen. But there are more options than just outright purchasing the land than there would be if you tried to develop their land, so.
I know I mentioned in a couple places that, and anybody else jump in if you have a question. I know I mentioned in a couple places you've already talked to MDOT about, the tracks and all of that. But I know a couple of years ago at least, when we were talking about, Pleasant Street Extension and going out to White's Island again, there was a significant cost, related to the train crossing, the pedestrian slash vehicle crossing over the tracks, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else so far that we know of that would be a barrier to this or complicating this in terms of the train tracks.
How to distill it too simply here, but the train tracks, at least in the site that we looked at, again, it's mostly what you're seeing on the screen here. Elevating the train tracks from what we've heard is just almost certainly not going to happen. They mentioned a $500 million bridge replacement having to happen in Bath before they would ever, improve this tracks. And with, I guess, with limited commercial freight and not a significant passenger freight or passenger line, they are they did just hire a new manager for the line, so they're still trying to invest in this line. But I think in terms of large, investments in changing it, from what we heard, again, that's not a plan to do that. But that means it's a restriction. It is, I think it's 14, trying to remember if it's 14.5 feet above zero, which is the mean lower low water. So that just means that that at-grade crossing at Route 1 is gonna have to get dealt with at some point. But again, it's not for several decades. That's likely, again, with the current projections, that's likely to be an issue. With the site, it just means that that grade crossing has to be maintained as long as that railroad is active. So if you look at the site on the town landing, if you wanted to elevate that town landing, just try to gesture in my hand, my hands here. If if you wanted to, let's say, we've elevated this, we've connected the boardwalk, elevated this. And now we have a master plan that says, oh, we're gonna raise this and build a seawall a couple of feet. You would need to grade this land down to meet the railroad track to maintain that crossing. So in the event of a flooding scenario, this effectively would have to become an island because the railroad tracks would be underwater. Now, if the MDOT decides that in that event, in the course of time, in 3 or 4 decades or 70 years or whatever, that they're gonna make that railroad exempt and sell parcels back, as some of that's happened down east, right, where there's rail trails and they've kind of reassigned, given some of that land back, then there's a different scenario. But based on the information we have to kind of just expect that there are gonna be trains there for at least probably 50 years. We don't really know yet, but that's kind of what we got from them, so.
Okay.
I had one addition, which is to say, Maine DOT is using the exact same sea level rise projections, and I believe that we're required to take them into account by law for their long range planning. So I would really expect them to have to make a decision sometime the next decade. So I would say that by the time this becomes a real issue of go or no go for the town, that DOT probably will make that decision.
It's a little crazy to me that they haven't planned for it already, because it's not like it's underwater daily, but it's often.
I would say they're probably waiting, they are working on a big hydrological study of storm surge and sea level rise, and it's probably gonna be finished in early 2027, so maybe another year. That I think will give them a much better picture. And I'm guessing at that point, they're gonna feel the pressure to make decisions.
It's not just in Wiscasset, all along that route.
Oh,
The
no.
whole thing have to be following
Yeah.
the river.
The whole thing's gonna be.
Yeah, I would say arguably it's like the most important deciding factor, because if we have to relocate the ramp, then what are we doing this for?
Relocate the boat ramp?
If that's the last step of the project and we're burdened by our DOT crossing, then we talk about a working waterfront.
So I guess the response to that we've heard is that you can still have water access at this site. You just wouldn't be able to trailer a boat into the water. So I know, again, it might seem like, well, the water, to many people, the ramps are the only reason to go here, but we've kind of heard from a lot of the public that this is an important spot with or without the ramps, that that's the waterfront, it's historical, high community value. A working waterfront, you could conceivably launch your boat, similar to where I live in South Bristol, you launch your boat in a certain place and you dock at another place, so. Even though the ramps leaving seems like a dramatic change, it would be a change in use, not necessarily complete. Change of not having commercial access at that point, but, kind of point taken that it's a big deciding factor, what happens to the railroad.
Did you discuss at all where the boat launch could go?
There were a lot of preliminary discussions, I don't know if those are things we can talk about or not, but,
I mean, one location that we talked about was Mesa Station, not the actual power plant, but some of the land around it. That's something to consider if we're doing more long-range planning at that location.
And then this is probably gonna sound like a really stupid question, but I would love if there are any specifics that were thrown out. It's mentioned a lot in terms of growing the economy, helping the local economy, et cetera, but there aren't really any specifics about that other than bringing people here. So I'm just curious if there were things that came up as you were writing the report or that you've seen in other studies you've looked at that are a little bit more concrete.
I would love to do like an actual parking lot, a traffic strip to see what usage through the summer it had or that kind of thing, but I mean, clearly the people from the waterfront committee that we had, like, they're using it every day, right? I know the working waterfront might not seem like the biggest economic driver, but, for people coming through, and again, I don't have the numbers of the annual average daily traffic on Route 1, but for people passing through the town that wanna stop and spend money here, yeah, you're right, it's soft ideas, it's not really like hard figures, but walkability downtown has kind of just come up, I would say, at almost every public event we had, and we had four events, I don't know if we had some tabling over the summer as well, Cassie, I don't know if you can speak to any of the engagement that you had, but downtown walkability sales from summer traffic being kind of like, it seems like, well, it's just a boardwalk, why would it matter that much, but people go to destinations and they spend money while they're there, so. I don't really have any more concrete numbers on that though, projections, but.
Yeah. I was gonna say, there was some great visioning done where we showed folks a lot of examples of different activities on the waterfront. And there was a lot of positive response to green space, people being able to gather along the waterfront, having places to take their kids to play, even water features, or biker walking paths. I will say, nobody wanted a cruise ship, so in there. But I think the feedback was just really positive in creating options to make it a welcoming spot. One person said something that's really stood out to me, it's a parking lot is not a welcoming space. I don't wanna go hang out at a parking lot in the waterfront, I'd like to go hang out in a greener space.
So I'm sorry.
So yeah, I think, like Ben said, we didn't have the capacity to do a specific study, but I think the general input that we got is that folk residents and visitors feel like there's so much potential there. And that these upgrades, resilience upgrades, could really create something that's a real asset for the town that attracts.
And on page 40, this is kind of a snapshot of that visual preference survey.
Yeah.
So visual preference surveys, pretty common in a lot of planning methods. We have the results of that, and I was just thinking that I should at least provide the results of that so that in future, it's not in this report in the appendix, but it could very easily be put in the appendix of this as well to just have as a reference, when we did this process in 2024, 2025, this many people responded and this is what they said they liked, and didn't like, and it was pretty, I won't say it was conclusive, but you get a real feel of what the people who participated, what they think they should have in the waterfront, so.
Sorry to monopolize. Any other report, Aaron? did
Well,
you-
I would just say, you know, like we talked about, like, there was no hard data, as everybody said, but it's, you know, we could look at maybe studies, I don't know if some studies, maybe, you know, about free time. To look at, you know, if there's any good data that would show that, you know, these type of improvements to the waterfront would actually bring in actual dollar amount. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that if you bring in more people downtown, or if you utilize that waterfront more, that people will be spending money in town. So, I mean, if we don't have actual data that suggests that, or, you know, actual dollar amounts for,
that,
it's a good, I don't know what you call it, they're not causing, it's a good,
correlative.
could be a good correlation to believe that if you're having more people downtown using the waterfront, they're gonna be going to Sprague's, you know, buying a lobster roll and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I will just add on to what Aaron's saying, is that's the reason we put the multimodal study as part of the master plan. Yeah, we didn't call out all the other things you have to do in the master plan, but studying how traffic and how people move around is probably one of the most important precedents to have in place before you do your waterfront master plan.
Yeah.
If that's they decide to proceed, so.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit more where I was going in terms of, I think. In the next steps, it will be important, particularly as people think about how we're gonna fund all of this. To be more specific,
Yeah.
even if it's not, well, this will bring in $1 million, you know, but more specific than this will be good for our economy in the downtown. Which I think you know. Okay, I have one or two final questions about next steps, but other board members. Questions, Elisa. It's muted, so I'm assuming no. Members from the public, any questions at this point? Obviously very preliminary, but yes, sir.
Yeah, quick question.
Sorry, if you don't mind coming forward and just stating your name for the record.
Patrick Sandiford, the question I have, actually something Kathy said that caught my attention. Well, when you're talking about the DOT and the railroad tracks, what they're gonna do with it. At first it was, you know, it looks like it could be 40 years, but there's somebody, you mentioned there's another study coming out that they're waiting for. That could accelerate, you know, their decision making. So I guess my question is how confident are the scientists in the current data that we're using versus what's coming? Because if the coming is worse, how do we know that, you know, the height that they're gonna build things to and everything else, if something should happen before that study, and I don't know if it will or won't, how do we protect against that? Is there a lot of CAD built into the heights of these different piers, or?
So, I will say that part of the reason we suggest to build wet-proofed wooden pier structures is that the cost of building them at X feet versus Y feet
Right.
is not astronomically different, whereas if you were to try to raise land at those different heights, it would be almost not exponentially, but geometrically like different costs. You know, the way we've kind of designed this is all based off of a datum, so if that datum, and if the data shows during the master planning process that the heights are different, then you would want to tailor them to those new heights. I don't think it would dramatically change what we propose, but it would probably be different heights that you put them to. And I don't know, Cassie might be able to speak to the science on it.
Yeah, I
So.
definitely have that to say, so totally appreciate wanting to make sure we're not using something that's gonna be out of date. So the projected numbers that we're using were just affirmed again by a scientific and technical committee that looks at these numbers and updates them every 4 years for the state. And they have affirmed, yes, that still makes sense. They actually think some of the higher sea level rise potential scenarios are a little less likely or might happen further in the future, which is helpful. So the hydrological study that Maine DOT is doing is they have been able to work with NOAA to get very, very high resolution photographic and bathymetric data all along the coast of Maine. We have the crinkliest coastline on the east coast. And all of those peninsulas make it really hard to model, okay, if you get a big storm coming in, how is it going to impact us here? You know, this far upriver, we're town on the coast. And so this is supposed to be a really high resolution model that helps them understand both long-term sea level rise and storm surge. And how is it interact with each other into the future. So I'm super excited for this study to come out for us. But I think it will help them better understand, okay, in some places, there could be a funneling effect from storm surge that instead of resulting in 3 feet of sea storm surge, they have 6 feet of storm surge or something. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's, so I think the general long-term numbers make sense. And this study done here showed that we don't have to worry about storm surge, but there's not as much funneling effect here. We don't worry as much about wind. So I think this will be helpful, but I think generally, like, we're pretty confident with numbers staying the same. And hopefully Antarctica does not collapse.
Well, yeah, it's the idea, in my mind, when we build something up and every few decades we have to rebuild it. That's the picture my head would come up with that. I'm sure, only because you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, but I will say, I mean, it's a great question, and honestly, you know, whenever we work with, you know, I'm lucky, so I'm interdisciplinary, I work with our planners who are very much concept driven and people driven.
Yeah.
Our engineers who are all numbers and materials, and our scientists who like to look at data that they can analyze and try to answer study questions. Each of these groups of people, you know, it's like you only can use the best information you have at the time. And you kind of know it's gonna change, right? We know that, like Cassie just said, the projections will, in the future, we're gonna find out, right? What happens in 5 years, because we're gonna be here. We're gonna find out that, and hopefully we're staying on top of it. You know, this planning process isn't static. Ideally, the master plan too. You make a master plan document and it guides development, but it's not just it's not a fixed thing that you're always heading for. We have to review it. Just like a comprehensive plan, you know, that's why the state has us do those every 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
So with the best information we have, this is kind of what we can show, and I guess ideally you'd be incorporating new information as you go along. So, okay, yeah.
That's my question. Thank you.
Anyone else have online, either use the raise your hand function or type something in the chat and then I can unmute you. While anybody's doing that, in terms of next steps, so I know we've already applied for another grant, correct? A community action grant to look at an actual master plan process, is that correct?
Yes.
That's what it would go toward.
I
Yeah,
believe,
so there's another round of that community action grant due in June, and I was thinking that maybe for us to apply for money for the master plan through that process.
So the grant that's already been applied for, was, for engineering design for elevating the commercial and, recreational.
Okay. And so, in terms of public input, at what point would that happen?
The master plan would be another whole set of meetings like we had here, and, we would probably end up developing an outreach plan. And maybe, visit them or talk, things like that.
Yeah.
But we do have limited resources in terms of when you get money from a grant, because you're hiring a consultant to help, so. But the town can help out with the outreach, so yes. The outreach for the master plan will be key. With the engineering, there would be less outreach, only because that's just like, putting some engineers in a room and actually going for the design at the waterfront. There would be some permitting, so they'd have to go before planning board and so forth. And so there would be outreach there, there'd be public meetings.
Right, I'm just trying to think about in terms of if someone's watching this or reading about this in the paper, okay, at what point do I get to have a say about whether I want a boardwalk or not?
Yeah, Yeah,
So
That would be in the master plan process.
Okay, so after engineering.
and if you, I don't know if you recall, the select board approved the community action grant for the engineering design, last fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, last fall.
and just to be clear, what was proposed is the engineering design is to retrofit, replace and or repair the existing infrastructure, not for the connecting boardwalk, so.
We probably did it a little bit backwards, we'll just be honest, you know, I'm not gonna hide that. But when we first were looking at the grant, that was sort of one of the master plan was actually the second item in the recommendation. And, the elevating the piers and stuff was the first item recommendation in that implementation metrics. And so that's why we went after the elevated pier as number one.
Sure.
And they can have,
But we had more public comment and we realized that probably shouldn't be like that.
So what do you need from us at this point? So, or are we waiting for another grant request basically, or a planning process?
Are you okay with us applying? You know, we'll come with you with a formal request, but are you okay with at least?
Drafting the request?
Yeah, or yeah, drafting a request, you know, for one of our master plan.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I feel like we need to take the steps to figure out what is the plan next, and if we can get some funding for that, that would be great, and then get the public input to make sure we wanna move forward. So,
Permission to go for a grant, and also permission to keep going forward, period.
okay, so what do we need for a motion?
I would say take a motion, one, to accept the report, and two, to authorize climate committee and Aaron to take the next steps to implement what's going on here.
Okay, anybody wanna make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so a motion to accept the report tonight, and to authorize or do you guys have don't you have a different name? WCAT. No, I meant the resilience
Oh,
committee,
sorry.
waterfront resilience committee. Is that technically a separate or no? Does it make sense?
It was more ad hoc just with the project.
Okay, so let's say and authorize WCAT and economic development director to move forward with the next steps for a master plan. Does that encompass what we need?
Yeah.
For the water.
Could I just add something, you know? You're kind of giving us blanket approval, but what I wanna say is that, no, but what I'm trying to say is we'll be coming back to you each step.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Well, I made it, I can't second it.
okay, well, I will second it then. Any further discussion, question?
So can you read the motion off again?
So the motion is to accept tonight's report and to authorize WCAT and the economic development director to move forward with next steps towards a master plan for the waterfront.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
Jackie, you'll get it
When
off.
it's hard to take, when it takes 5 minutes to get the report, the motion. Voice.
All right, all those in favor? Elisa, if you're still with us? Are you in favor of that long motion?
You have to unmute her, it has to be verbal.
Oh.
Okay, now, yes, I'm in favor of the motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 5-0. All right, thank you very much.
thank you.
I would just like to say that, this pleasure working with Ben, but maybe working this team.
Great, thank you very much. We look forward to bidding on any future RFPs you put out. There's also a few typos we just reported, so I'll be issuing one more. But that's it, just typos. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we need that back up for the.
Well, I take the laptop.
Right, but he has to take his laptop.
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, that? What?
She was asking about her presentation.
If it's gonna work.
Oh,
It's voted.
I don't know, we're gonna find out.
let me, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have a flash drive, but the computer's not working.
Hers is the PDF.
It should, yeah. Yeah.
There's another draft.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we have the artifacts presentation, and it does look like it's gonna be fine, but it's just a PDF now.
I PDF'd it because specifically I had that issue.
So just holler when you want me to move the slide.
Thank you.
But I just add something on Cassie, quick prepared and CO Rise 101 with cheap. For everybody.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Well, it's fine. We have it. Print out of the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a link, wasn't
Who gave a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we have,
Okay.
yeah, I have.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So cheap, they were colored, and then a lot of pages and I said, how to. Well, happy to, anybody that wants printed, so I certainly.
Okay, well, thank you, for inviting me tonight. I'm Ellen Angel. I'm an architect and, one of two principals at Artifacts AE in Bangor. So, and I didn't cover a lot of the process in the report, so I'll go kind of talk about that a little bit before we start flipping through the slides. But we were also initially hired, via an RFP that the town put out for an assessment of their municipal buildings, which included this building and the community center, the rec center. And so the initial assessment team was made up of myself, structural engineer, civil engineer, a historic architect, an intern, and an architect from the firm of Mans Woodward, who are, they're a specialty firm that does public safety work all through the country, actually, all over the United States. So Mans Woodward does police stations, fire stations, EMS stations. They do all kinds of municipal planning, and we've worked with them for about 6 years now, doing programming. So this report covered, and the process for this report was sort of two-pronged, right? So we're looking at the actual physical building, like, you know, how's the structure, how are the walls, does it meet the current codes? But we were also looking at programming, which was how the people who needed to work within the buildings were able to do what they needed to do. How were the programs being able to be accomplished? So for example, that was specific to the rec center, right? If they needed to do childcare programs, did they have the appropriate space for that? Did they have the space for some of the physical training classes they wanted to do, right? For here, it was more of, do you have the appropriate facilities and spaces for the police department? Does the building meet some of the current requirements in terms of how those departments operate, right? So it was sort of two-pronged. And I think that's important to remember because just, you know, just to say it to start with, this is a very resilient building, right? It's built to last. Unfortunately, the things that make it resilient, it's boon and it's bane, right? Because it's very difficult to change something that's made out of concrete block. And when all the internal walls are made out of concrete block, sometimes that's a difficult thing to work with. So anyway, we can start with, so, you know, again, this is how most people enter your municipal building. It's not how it was designed to be entered. It was designed to be entered off of, you know, Route 1, off of the main street. But because of the traffic problems, you can't really park, can't come off of that street, park and enter from the front. Because of the way the departments have changed the usage of different pieces of the building, doesn't really work. The addition of the police station, you know, has an entrance at the other end. So this building now gets entered in terms of the people that come to the clerk's office or to see the treasurer, pay their taxes, whatever, come through this door into this facility. And because it needs updated mechanical systems, it comes right by the door. So it's not the best entryway, but it's, you know, again, there's nothing wrong with it. It works, right? We're mainers, we make it work. Go to the next. So we visited both buildings. We spent quite a bit of time looking at what were the issues with the existing facilities, right? What were, maybe structural things that didn't work, what were code things that didn't work? But we also looked at so physical, right, but also programmatic. And then we had to address, how do you fix that and what's it gonna cost? And so that's what we were tasked to do. Okay, you can look at that. So basically what we found out in terms of this particular building, right? There's limited space for growth. Because of the way that just the geography of the site, you've got ledge out back, you've got a road that's kind of higher, you've got a very busy street in front. It's, there's not a lot of places for the building to expand. And the things that you need to expand are not necessarily things that you could, for example, put on the second floor. The other thing is second floors are expensive. We can talk about that later. But anyway, there's very limited space for growth. You're at max capacity for a lot of things. One is storage. There's storage in all the aisles. And I'm just trying to figure out this. Yeah, I guess this is the right thing. No, they had pictures in this. But there's storage in the aisles. I mean, you walk down the hallways here. I can't see because the door's closed, but actually it's on the other side in the police department especially. There's storage right in the middle of the aisle, right? Not a good thing. There are safety and security concerns, right? So you dealt with a lot of the safety concerns in the era of COVID by, you know, the kind of the plastic shields in front of the clerk's office space, but that doesn't really provide you a lot of safety. And what we've discovered since Lewiston is, you know, Maine's no longer the safest place, you know, things can happen. There's not a likelihood it's gonna happen, but the problem is if it does happen, the results are devastating. So even though it's, you know, there's a low opportunity, you wanna make that opportunity as minimal as possible. And there are things that the public shouldn't necessarily be able to access without control, right? So what we've got here in several places are like, the kind of little guards that you put for your dog or for your toddler. That doesn't really work, because anybody can just open it and keep going. And the safety and security of your employees is really an important part of the building. There are construction, there are elements of the building that are past its usable life. There's little things, I mean, the bathrooms are really kind of, in not, let's say, contemporary. They're also not technically meeting the ADA. I mean, they're an attempt to meet the ADA. When you have an existing building like this, that's all you're really required to do, is the best you can do, but it doesn't actually completely meet the ADA requirements. And your access in some locations, like you can't get into the police station, that there's no ADA access to the police station. There's not really an ADA access into the fire station. This part of the building, this is ADA accessible, but that's not a good thing. And there's scheduling conflicts with shared spaces, right? You can't always use something because somebody else needs that space. There's not real, like a conference room, the manager has to have meetings in his office. There's not really, everybody has, if you're gonna have a meeting, you kind of have to have it in your office, or you have it here, but you can't really have it here because public can walk through. So that's not really a good, so it's a lot of minimal, a lot of little like ticks that, you know, kind of undermine the usefulness of the entire building. So those are primary issues. There's a lot of them, but they add up to kind of a major issue. You go to the next slide. This is where we looked at what was appropriate space for the different functions and what was the space provided in this building for those functions. So this is the programming piece of it, right? The first one was, you know, like I said, some of the structural and element of the building. This is actually the spatial use. And this was where we relied quite a bit on our consultant, because again, he's dealing with what are the things that, for example, will make sure that your police department meets the national criteria, right? And what are the elements that make sure that your fire department and your EMS, right, are meeting the national criteria. And that is a big benefit to the city because it lowers your insurance rates, it provides a level of oh, that's the word I'm looking for, searching for the right word, but it's something I think you want to do, right? You don't have to do it, it's not a law. In some cases, you know, because the state of Maine has not adopted, for example, parts of the National Fire, of the NFPA codes, right? The Maine hasn't adopted those, the fire marshal's office has not adopted those. With MUBEC, we adopted NFPA 101, and we also use NFPA 1, but some of the other stuff, it's not. It's in the code that we should be doing certain things, in the NFPA codes that we should be doing certain things, but because the state hasn't adopted them, we don't have to do them, right?
Yeah.
But they're still there. So anyway, this was an evaluation by the consultant. We came back and we said, you know, this is Maine, we can minimize some of these things. I don't think we need to do, you know, this and this. Wiscasset's a town, it's, you know, the population is smaller, what can we, and so we pulled a lot of that down in size. We still ended up with the actual square footage requirements for the police, the fire, the EMS, and the city offices are about 40,000 square feet. Much of that expansion is based on the need for apparatus space for fire and EMS, because your apparatus bays are really undersized and not as functional as they could be and should be for those two services, right? And the police department no longer has a Valley Port, which is not also a really great thing. So the reason that square footage gets so big, one of the reasons it gets so big is because you need those vehicle supports. Okay? So again, there's two slides of this, and I can go through each of the different square footages, but basically what this says is, look, this is what you have, and this is, you know, there's two columns, and the difference is we said, okay, if you have you need a 12 by 12 office for somebody, let's say, because they've got files and they've got things and they maybe meet one-on-one with someone, and so you need a 12 by 12 office. But in order to support a 12 by 12 office, you have to have a corridor to get to the office. So we have what we call a factor that we use to go from that square footage for a space to the square footage for the building. And that factor ultimately includes things like your mechanical space, your restrooms, your corridors, the thickness of walls, that kind of thing. And the factors are different for like a city office than they are for like a police station or a fire station. So for example, I think we have police officers. Okay, but he doesn't have all this stuff with him, right? But you know, when they walk by, they've got a gun, they've got maybe a phone, maybe they've got a taser, maybe they're not, you know, they're not a slim guy, they're a girl. Their hips get widened out, right? So you try and get, if they're bringing somebody in to question them, or if they're, two of them are walking past each other, you're not gonna make that work in a 4-foot corridor, right? So the sizing factor in a police station gets bigger to allow for bigger corridors. That's just an example, okay? So that's why we have that, the program space, and then we have the extended required space. That's how that number gets up. We don't like just say, oh, that was the number, but we don't think it's big enough, we make it bigger. We multiply it by this factor that takes into account those realities of use. So this is your existing floor plan. And with the departments, and it's, you know, it's pretty neat and clean. The municipal offices are to the right, fire department's in the middle. EMS is, next, kind of squeezed in there. EMS is also upstairs, but I don't discuss the upstairs specifically because technically it is not code compliant. Technically, and again, the authority having jurisdiction, which could be the local code officer, can say, okay, it's okay, you can use the upstairs for the second floor for your offices, but technically it's not code compliant. Should be on the first floor, you should have an elevator. And also of the 2 stairs there, only one of them is actually code compliant. The other one has a few problems, one of which is the steps aren't the same height, so it's a trip hazard. And you know, our EMS chief didn't know that until we measured it. And said, these steps are all over. She goes, that's why I keep tripping. But you know, these things are in an emergency, that's not a big deal, right? It might not be much, you know, it might be just a frustration on a day-to-day basis, but in an emergency, those things are a big deal. And the police department really has a lot of issues. I mean, first of all, it's not accessible, because you gotta go down the steps to get into it. And which I thought I had, what have you all our pictures?
They're on the next section, and we start going into the.
Oh, they're at the back? Okay, well, all right, we'll get to them. Anyway, there's no accessibility into the station. Anybody that's coming into the station is coming in mostly through the front door. There is a back door. But that, if you come in the front door, you're like you know, you can be dealing with some not very nice people there, and yet the receptionist secretary is like right there, right? So if somebody comes into the police station, they're unprotected. The chief is basically unprotected. Anybody in there is basically unprotected because there's no real control, right? There's a couple of doors, and there is some, I believe there is some ballistic glass, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not the whole wall. The wall isn't, I mean, there's a few things. Anyway, that particular portion is not really the safest thing. So, okay, Lynn, let's go. This one is about the constraints. Again, there's an inadequate number of parking spots right now. There's not separated staff and public parking, so it's all kind of first come, first serve, which isn't the worst thing, but the worst thing is the traffic congestion that can really disrupt the service and the access, especially when the fire trucks are trying to get out and there's, you know, it's all blocked on the road. And it's not the best thing. Coming right out onto Route 1 is not necessarily the best thing. And there's limited space for growth. So what I was talking about previously was that triangle section in the back behind the building, it's basically ledge. And so in order to, and the fact that the building is parallel to Route 1, but the site is sort of triangular, there's not a whole lot of good place to grow the building. There is some, but it's limited. So, like, next slide. So what we looked at was, okay, if we have this need for this additional square footage and we have this site that's really limited in terms of where we can put that additional square footage, what can we do? So we looked at three different options. I'll start with number three and go forward. We go to one. Number three is, okay, let's just go someplace else and build a new building. So I think that the thing about that is it's very expensive, right? Now, I disagree with, it shouldn't say most disruptive. It's probably the least disruptive. You build a new building and you move into the building, right? So you don't have to worry about what's going on here until you move, and then you move, and then this building is left. But it is the most expensive. That cost does not take into account the value of the site. So if there was a sales value for the site, it would potentially lessen the total cost of the project. But building a brand new building right now, construction costs are extremely high and they keep going up. And we don't have control over that. We just know that in the grand scheme of things, we typically say construction costs go up 5% a year. And historically, that's the slope. It's 5%. Sometimes it goes up 8%, sometimes it goes up 3%, but the slope is 5% a year. So if you're dealing with a $10 million building, every year it goes up $500,000, right? So if you're dealing, with a $20 million building, every year it goes up $1 million. And if you started planning today on the building, you're not gonna be building it for at least a year. And so all of these numbers, as I said, are based on a square footage, dollar per square foot number that we're comfortable with today. Where that is in 6 months or a year, it would depend on the design of the building and who you had work at it. But these are, for the purposes of planning and making decisions, these are as accurate as we can get at this moment. Okay, so building a brand new building would, move everybody out, it would cost you close to $30 million. You could instead build a new fire station and EMS station somewhere. And that would cost about 19 to 20 million. That would free up that whole space, which we think could be then repurposed for the police department and city offices, right? So that would mean also some remodeling, so that number includes remodeling of this existing building. And remodeling is, in that case, would happen in the middle of the building, and you basically pull out most of the interior walls and redo it. But you'd also have to redo this, because this side is not, not working effectively at this moment. So I would say that that's number two is actually the most disruptive one. Okay. It would be great for the fire and EMS, but it probably wouldn't, it would probably cause a lot of disruption to all the other services trying to get that together. Option number one, I think, is the least disruptive. It's the one we've talked about with the city staff, and they feel this would be the most appropriate. And that's to take the town offices out of this portion of the building, build a new town office, and then repurpose this entire building as a public safety building with police, fire, EMS. And what it would entail would be adding on the bays for the vehicles. So we have a plan, I think the next sheet, if you go to the next sheet. This would be the new town hall. This is approximately the appropriate site. This is at the size of the building, excuse me. This would be at the recreation center site. It would get, some of your traffic away from downtown, give you a lot of parking capacity. you've got a continuity of, you know, your public services and your community center in one space. We show in our report, we dealt with everything individually, so we dealt with a town hall that has certain services that function as a town hall. We dealt with the existing community center and additions that could be done to that. But at the time that you went out for an RFP or RFQ to design a new town hall, you might wanna think about what facilities or services are existing in the community center that could be part of a town office, town hall building. For example, the senior center right now, I'm kind of jumping, but unfortunately, it's the complexity of some of this. The existing community center has the senior center and the childcare, and they share the same space. And so they have to make that work by figuring out what times certain groups can use it. And then they have to kind of, sometimes they close it off with walls and sometimes, and it doesn't always work all that effectively. And because of how they use it, the security of having that childcare can be compromised. So it could be that as part of the town office, you had a place for the seniors to use or something, you know? I mean, these are all things that I'm not thinking about, but I know that they're potentials that are there in the next step of the process. But this does give you this kind of nifty little community town office central location by the school, everybody knows where it is. And provides for that. Okay, these are some of the issues I talked about with the town office, just to, you know, that's your security right there.
Well, that's for the dog. Yeah, it actually.
That's how this for his dog.
It is.
Yeah, but it also
It's
said-
not really security.
It used to say no public beyond this point.
Yeah, but it was.
It didn't
for the
work,
dog.
but
It was really for the dog.
But also like where your window is there, you know, where you put the plexiglass. Right,
Yeah.
that doesn't really keep you secure. And then this is some of the storage in the corridors there with the chairs and stuff. Go to the next one. So this would be a proposed town office. And what this does is it separates the functions. It's not, you know, it provides for a central lobby. You come in, you can deal with the clerk, the tax collector, the kind of the basic things that, you know, paying your taxes, getting your licenses, those kind of things, right there in the lobby. That also allows you a lobby into the meeting room where you can have your IT, you can have extra storage for that and some public restrooms. Plenty of public restrooms. That's the left side. The right side would be your offices. And again, the idea would be that there would be a small conference room off that lobby corridor. So that anybody that needed to meet with the public could meet there without dragging people through the offices around the spaces that are used for town functions. There's a lot more storage in this. There's Dennis has sort of said that he kind of liked people to, you know, meet with the town manager. And I'm like, that's good, but this way you can escort them and bring them in. They don't just wander down the corridor and hit your office. And then it also allows for connections to the meeting room without, you know, for staff or council, whatever. So anyways, but it's schematic, it's not a design, it's just, that's how much square footage you actually need in order to have a functioning town office. And we arranged it in a way that would fit on the site, you know, right? So it's a conceptual design, it's not a design. And we use that square footage to put a price on, right? We had to have something, we had to know how big the building was and what kind of things would be in it to put a square footage price to say, okay, this is what it would cost. So that's what we get with that. Okay, then the next potential piece of this would be the remodeling of this building for public safety. And again, a lot of this is like getting, it requires gutting a big piece of it, but it would be to add bays on this end of the building that would then access not to Route 1, but I don't even know what this little street is back there.
Churchill Street.
Churchill Street. It would access onto Churchill Street, which would then give you more space to, well, first of all, you could go up, I'm sorry, my brain is not giving me the names of the roads. Anyway, you could go up. 27, or you could go down to Route 1. It would give you enough time to start like either controlling the lights or sirens so that people are not like right there and then they're on it. We also added a small sally port to the front of the building and provided for police vehicle only parking off of Route 1. So that's not public parking, that's just police, a police vehicle. And, you know, that way it's secure, number one, and it's isolated from everybody else. Everybody else can park in the back piece of the building. Also, we have a through bay for the fire truck. So we couldn't do more than one, potentially two through bays. It really depends on how much parking gets calculated, but then that would allow coming down the other direction to turn on to Route 1, which I think would be, you know, a lot more effective. And again, what we're showing here is one of the issues right now with the existing building is you've got these vehicle bays, then you've got operations, then you've got administration, and you've got public access. And it, as you can see, it's like polka dots, right? It's nothing is kind of cleanly, this is where the public stops. This is where this works, this is where that works. So if you go to the next one, I think, no, this is again, examples. That's the entrance to the police department. You see it's not handicap accessible. You can see they've got their gear washer in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. They've got gear hanging in the apparatus bay, which is really not a best practice because of off-gassing. Both things are sort of carcinogenic. There's PFAS in the gear, which is not a good thing. And, you know, we're trying to deal with that nationally for that issue. But what that needs to be is in its own room where with its own ventilation so that as much of that can off gas and get out of the space as possible. And it certainly shouldn't be next to a diesel truck. It then also gets covered with diesel, and you know, then a guy goes to put it on, a girl goes to put it on, and they're breathing diesel fumes. So these are really not good, healthy practices for your public safety people. So this is kind of what we're proposing, which would be the police have its own facility with, you know, limited access from the public, that EMS and actually EMS and police and fire would share the central area, which would be like break room, workout space, that kind of thing. Then EMS and fire would be to the right hand side with the bays for fire. We didn't show the through bays, but anyway, for fire and for the EMS vehicles with in the center section there, that's the decon area, so that their gear and they can come in and be decontaminated, which there isn't really any space for that at the moment, and that's not a good thing. So that the additional spaces is the big block to the right and the small blue block bottom left. And so that, anyway, that's where the money, the dollar numbers come from, is we looked at, okay, what if we did these things, how much would it cost to do this kind of work? There's so much per dollar per square foot for remodeling, so much for addition, so much for new building, so much for apparatus bays that have a different price per square foot than, for example, locker rooms and showers and spaces like that have heavy utility use. They're less expensive per dollar square foot, basically. So, anyways, we can stop here. You can ask me questions on this, or I can keep going through the whole.
I would say keep going.
Okay.
We can back.
So we also looked at the community center and rec center. And in speaking with the folks there and in looking at the building, the biggest issue is just space, that basically everything is well subscribed to. People love the building, people love using the building, but for certain programs, there just isn't enough space. The number one thing is there's no storage. They obviously have a storage container out the back that's got stuff. But if you go into the mechanical space in the attic, it is just chock-a-block full. I mean, and it's really well organized, and I give them kudos for that. Because I've been in a lot of rec buildings and it's the problem of rec departments, because you have basketball and you have soccer and you have baseball and you have all these different sports and things that have different seasons and different equipment, and they have to be kept somewhere. And, you know, when you're dealing with like 300 basketballs, for example, I mean, they take up space. You don't deflate them, you know, you have to just put them somewhere, or soccer nets or all of those things. So that's a big problem. The other one is that within the building, there's not space for certain things. They have exercise classes and they have to put them in the gym, so then they can't use the gym for basketball because there are exercise classes in there. Or they have, people want to work out on certain kinds of equipment. And apparently there are times when it's so full that, you know, there are people waiting for equipment, but also they've had to move certain pieces of equipment out into the building, into spaces that were not designed for that, like the waiting area by the pool where they've got bicycles now, because why not? So, and as I had stated before, one of the big problems is that conflict kind of between the senior, conflict's too harsh of a word, but maybe a time conflict between the senior use of the space and the after school. Because they do happen at slightly different times, except vacation, summer, snow days, you know, things like that, where they're providing the services, but the seniors have already planned for certain things, so they have to either not schedule the senior services or, right? So you get the idea. Okay, you can go to the next one. Again, this is the similar kind of thing of what the different, programs are, the amount of space for it. This is not a huge add to a big building, but it is, you know, 5,000 square feet is a significant size space. So it costs. You wanna go to the next? These are some examples, you know, you can see the exercise equipment, it is pretty much jammed into that space. And you can see the storage is definitely jammed into that space. And again, that area there where they've got the tables, they've got some exercise equipment there where it was meant for people waiting for or watching kids in the pool, or, you know, programs in the pool. So it wasn't designed for, there's nothing wrong with changing how something's used. You know, if it was designed for one thing, it doesn't function for that. Of course, it's great to change the use of it, but if it was designed for something, people are kind of using that for that thing, but you also have a need for something else, and you're trying to squeeze two things together, that's kind of a problem. But anyway, that's generally in terms of functional relationships, the light green is circulation and public. The public is, again, allowed everywhere in this building, which in itself is not problematic, but it's our experience that typically childcare programs or even after-school programs are isolated from other uses of a building just because you want to control who has access to younger kids or to kids, period, right? So that, I'm not sure we're solving that problem with our design, but we're making a stab at it. So I think so the idea is, as you can see, there's an addition in the front and one to the side. On the side is a major storage space. And then on the front, what we've done is increased the square footage of what was the kind of senior childcare area, and also what was the workout space and, you know, exercise room in the classroom, so that they're expanded enough to accommodate the functions that they would like to see in them. And what we would suggest in terms of the big conflict with the kids and the seniors is, like, if you provide a space that's for both of them, what we like is that the kids are isolated so that nobody's going through their space to do something else. The big thing is that the kids now use the outside space to the left of the building. And that's kind of a tough thing to do if you put the seniors there, but if you put the seniors on the right side, then you have to go through the seniors to get to the childcare. So what we thought was that maybe there needed to be some look at what happens in that, in some of the outdoor space, or how that, how that can function. This is, again, not a solution, it's a conceptual plan for us to figure out, can we get more square footage on that building, on that site? Do we have enough space for it? Do we have, and if we do it, what does it cost? So again, it seems like it's a big site, but it is constrained by various, geographic conditions and uses. And so that's about as much space as we can get on there, unless we start wrapping around back on the pool area. And it's so nice to have those windows and everything. I don't think anybody'd be really happy with us doing that, so. So anyway, that's it. I'm sure that these raises as many questions as it answers. But, that's why I'm here.
I mean, I wanna be cognizant of folks' time. I know we've been here for a while. I've got a list. But I guess the first question would be, what's the next process in terms of, a bunch of my questions may be more appropriate for further down the road.
At this point, the department heads, they're aware of the report, they've seen the report, we have not had any internal discussions about this, so I really think the first thing we need to do is, internally, we need to get in and we need to internalize this and say, okay, these are the options. Do we feel from our experience, because we're the ones that are here working every day, is this actually going to work? Is this, is this option going to work for us? And if not, is this option going to work for us? And if not, move on. And in my mind, that's, I think, the next step that needs to happen here is, we need to look at this and figure out if we think this is a workable option.
Okay, cause like I'm not a.
And at that point, maybe that will solve some, I don't know what your questions are. but-
Well, I mean, part of it's just like, and I know you said this isn't like a full design, none of these are full designs and all of that, but. Like, I'm not a security and safety expert, but like having a buzz-in system for the entire community center is not really
Right.
workable. I get the concern about kids and all that needs to be addressed, but stuff like that. And obviously lots of questions about funding and how we would do this and what would be the timeline, and you can see where I'm going. Well,
Yeah, and what's gonna happen.
Also, I didn't see.
yeah, I mean, I think that
So
would.
the only access to the senior center is from outside.
Um,
They have their
Or
own
through the
entrance
kitchen.
and they can't
again,
get from
I'm
the
not
rest of
trying
the
to
building.
design this. I don't feel like we solved that problem.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
just felt
exactly.
like-
So that's not a.
Right, like what I was trying to do was to say. The biggest thing with that building is, where can you put an addition on that building that is not,
Ugly.
no, that doesn't like. Right now, because the road comes around the side there between the school, right? There's not a lot of space in there. So what can we, that's where we'd love to put like storage and that kind of thing. And expand the exercise spaces and all that. It's really tight, so we had to work around that. When we got to the other side, we said, where can we put this space? And we've got the, I don't know if it's a creek, but it's a fall off right at that
Brook.
side there, brook. And we've got the parking and so where can we put, so that's what we were really looking at. Again, this is my point back again to the town office. If you provide in the town office a kitchen, then there's the possibility of using a room like this for senior activities, because how often do you have town meetings, right? So maybe during the day, that space gets used by them there. I can't make those decisions, I can offer these as possibilities, and that takes away a lot of that, you know.
Yeah, I guess the other piece is. It almost seems like we sort of need a plan similar to what was proposed with our previous presentation in terms of. What would be the phases and I mean, there are some things that it seems like we need to address fairly quickly, other things that would be ideal, but don't need to be done tomorrow. And then obviously, again, the money piece.
Yeah,
And particularly if we're also doing a waterfront resiliency project and a sewer plant and, you know,
yeah,
so.
Because
So-
we prioritize what we have to do compared to what we like.
so.
Right.
So I think in terms of what you have to do, like, for example, you're not gonna be able to do true ADA accessible restaurants. You're not gonna be able to provide security unless we start, because the configuration, the way it is right now, you have to have exiting covered as well as, you know, entry as well as, so it doesn't lend itself, I mean, I can do that, I can design the space. But in the meantime, while we're gutting the space, what do you do with the town functions, right? You move everybody, all of you guys in here, you know, and then you kind of gut what's there. So the reason that number one option seems to be the most least disruptive is you get a new town office. And that allows you to have this building with enough space in it that you can gut things and move things, right? And not disrupt everything. That, I mean, that's, you know. It's a judgment call on the part of the city and I think the staff really has to say that's what they want.
So at this point, should we kick it back to you all as the folks who are in these buildings? And then, because, I mean, if you're like, no, this is just not gonna work at all, then I don't think there's any point in going in option one direction. We need to pull back and look at something else.
Yes, so I think, you know, if you're satisfied with the report, you should accept the report and then do exactly that, kick it back to us, to come back with. Our recommendations as to what direction we think this should go. And then we can start working on planning, financing.
Yeah.
Putting this in our capital plan, along with all these other things that you just mentioned, so.
Is that,
Motion to accept the proposal.
I was just gonna say, is there any other questions? Jenny, did you?
I was just gonna add a comment, sorry, Jenny Sturgeon. Just as you're considering, I know that there's been, some audits, like energy efficiency around some of the public buildings too. And so just keeping that as a consideration too, like this holistic viewpoint of like how to think about putting this plan together and, just not losing that focus. Yeah.
Thank. Any other comments? Bill, did you want
Yes,
to maybe?
I make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second that. So, we're not gonna make two motions or no?
Oh, do you want two motions instead?
It doesn't matter, you do one or two, I think, that's fine.
All right, we'll just do one at a time then. Any other questions, discussion on accepting the report? All those in favor? Elisa? Hang on, I'm on the wrong computer, just the other one.
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you, okay, stay on for a second, and then we need another motion.
Make a motion to kick it back to Dennis.
Elaborate a little more.
This is consistent.
Make a motion goes back to the town manager to go over it with the different department heads to see how it works.
Okay, come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, and come back with a recommendation. Okay, been moved,
Second,
yep. Any further comments or discussion? All those in favor? Lisa?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're good for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
My favorite is the third one, that you just do a whole new thing.
Yeah, well, if somebody wins Powerball, we know. All right. Monthly financials, department year-to-date expense revenue at HM Payson. Not looking so hot with, you know, the world as it is.
Are being hotly different, please.
Well, she looks like, all right. Town manager's report.
Because I asked Erin to stay, I'll do this first. In her report, you might have noticed that she was asked to teach a class at Atlantic Motor Cars for a group of motorcyclists. And we received this email about that. It says, "Hello, Erin. I wanted to thank you once again for putting on the technical first aid class last weekend. The way you presented and teach the class was outstanding. The town and the residents of Wiscasset should be thankful for your service. I also wanted you to know there's been nothing but accolades from your talk from other members, the Tasket podcast, blah, 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 blah. Kindest regards, Jonathan, Clegg, who was the president of this group, I guess.
Yes.
So, thank you for making us all. Now you do. Just a couple of things, because I didn't do a written report for you guys. I will be out of town March 30th and 31st. I will be in Washington DC for a few days.
For a second, I was like, where are you going? All right.
And our department heads today during our staff, Bill was there. We did do training on the use of artificial intelligence, which was required as part of the policy that you passed at your last meeting. And I think everybody got something quite useful out of that. It was a good class. A reminder that we have our final budget meeting on the 24th, which is next Tuesday at 6 p.m. We have everything all ready to go, so it shouldn't be a huge long meeting. And we can get the budget figures finalized for the town meeting warrant, which I plan to have done for you on April 7th. Meeting. Because that has to be in the town clerk by April 9th. To be 30 days before the election, and the school is scheduled to get me their town meeting warrants by April 2nd, so those can be on that, approved at that same meeting. That's it, that's all I have.
Any questions, Dennis? All right, I don't have any other more business, if someone would like to make a motion.
I think a motion be adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor? Elisa?
I
All right. We are adjourned at 8:01.